Welcome to today's episode of Redundancy Matters, and I'm delighted today to be joined by Angela Wilkins-Green. Angela is an executive coach for women, and she's also a menopause expert. So it's lovely to have you with me today, Angela, and I'm really looking forward to talking about how menopause can impact women going through redundancy or restructure and how we can raise awareness and help people in that situation, helpline managers to support people at what can be a difficult time, and particularly if someone's going through perimenopause or menopause, and what we can do to support them. So thanks for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's lovely to be here.
That was a short introduction, but I'd love to hear more from you about the sort of work that you do and your background as well.
Lovely. Okay, thank you. Yes, so as you said, I am an executive coach and a menopause consultant, and I work with women in senior leadership positions, helping them navigate through their perimenopause into postmenopause whilst holding down these careers and also dealing with everything else that's going on in our lives. So I have not been doing that forever. I have a 25-year career in fashion retail. I was merchandising director for many years and absolutely loved my career, but my perimenopause kicked in. I found out I was in perimenopause at the age of 44, but realised that it probably started between the age of 40 and 42, but I had no idea that it was happening. Never heard of the word perimenopause before. I thought menopause was something that happened in your 50s. So it completely threw me and sent me on a downward spiral over a 2-year period. And I crashed and I cried every day for 3 months and ended up walking away from my career for good. So that is why I'm here doing what I do, to make sure that doesn't happen to any other women.
Wow. That sounds like that was a real big decision for you to step away and to bring all that experience from your retail director background and your personal experience of what it means to go through perimenopause. And so we're talking today about the context of redundancy. So thinking about redundancy and women who'll be in those transition phases, why does redundancy matter to you?
I think redundancy in reality is something that the majority of us will experience at least once during our career. It's happening more and more. And women are staying in the workplace for much longer. So we've actually got nearly, I think it's about 4.9 million women in the UK who are in the workplace aged 50 plus. So pretty much all of those women are either peri or postmenopausal. And then if you include all of the women who are in their 40s, who are also going to be perimenopausal, that is millions and millions of women out there who are transitioning through this life phase and are very likely to experience going through a restructure or redundancy. So I think organisations really understanding how women are impacted at this stage and how that will affect us when we're going through these extremely stressful periods of our lives is really important.
And raising that awareness in general, as you say, there's millions of women who are in the workplace. So tell me, what can organisations really do to raise that awareness now that quite rightly, there is more awareness out there, but I'm sure there's lots that businesses can be doing.
Yeah, there's a huge amount. And as much as there are many businesses out there now doing a fantastic job in this space, there really are. So I really want to commend all the organisations out there that are working really hard. There are still thousands and thousands out there that will not acknowledge that this is a thing that needs to be talked about at work. So we have a huge amount of work still to do to raise the awareness. One of the biggest things, I think, is start listening. Start listening to the women in your organisation. Even start listening to the signs from the men in your organisation, because most of them are going to have somebody in their life that's going through the menopause. So this isn't just about the women. This is everybody that can and may be affected by menopause in the workplace. So I think listening and really listening to the signals, what's actually going on, what's the culture like. And I think the work has to start long before anything else in terms of what culture do you have? Do you have a culture of openness? Do people feel safe to talk about personal issues in the workplace? Because so many places that's really still not happening. And then once you've got the backbone in place of somewhere safe for people to talk to, it might be a single person in the HR department or just a space where people can go, then you can get into, okay, what now can we specifically talk about in terms of, do we want to bring in some training? Do we just want to do a lunch and learn just to raise awareness in the first instance? Do we do manager training? Do we have a policy? Do we need a policy? And those, I think, are the main starting points to get you on that road. And then depending on how many women you have in your organization, that's when you can start to take it much more seriously. And you might have menopause champions within your organization and have that proper group and possibly one-to-one support. So there's loads you can do from free support right the way through to that one-to-one support.
And that point you made there about creating that safety, creating that space, but listening to your organisation. And there might be, and there will be, organisations that have very few women, and maybe they're okay with just having some one-to-one support. Maybe they don't want to talk about it. They don't want posters. They don't want it out there. And you could have the converse, where you have 80% women, for example, and it's more of an issue and people have to talk about it. So, she's saying, rather than Googling, what can we do for menopause, we'll just do a kind of sheep dip approach.
Yeah, absolutely. It's understanding who you've got in your organisation and asking them, what do they want? What do they need? And actually listening to what they have to say.
So when you think about those conversations that managers will be having with individuals in a restructure, which may or may not lead to redundancy, but assuming that maybe that might be the outcome, those are difficult conversations with everybody, and everybody should be treated as an individual and really let those conversations led with empathy and care and compassion. And I'm thinking about what line managers can do or what they might notice about team members who might be perimenopausal or postmenopausal, and what they can really do to attend to any particular needs or differences that might present.
Yeah. Again, it comes down to your ability to notice what's going on with your employees, to really get to know them. Because the biggest thing you can do, the most helpful thing you can do, is understand when something is changing. Because it might be really subtle. And it might be that she's struggling to show up in meetings. She's just gone a little bit more quiet than usual. Or all of a sudden, she keeps turning up later than she normally would, which isn't necessarily a problem, but it's just another sign that something is changing. And it's not always easy to open up and just have the conversation. It's not every woman wants to talk about it. And so for a manager to know how to handle it is about having open conversations and asking open questions. So don't directly go in and say, are you struggling with menopause symptoms? Because some women are going to react really badly to that. But actually, I've noticed you don't seem quite yourself at the moment. Is there anything you need from me? Is there anything I can do? Just that question alone can absolutely transform how a woman is feeling in the workplace. So I do think it really comes down to the communication piece. If we can get the communication right between the leaders and peers and people feeling safe, that is going to have the biggest impact on how you manage these difficult transitions.
And that ability to notice, and for anybody, that, as a line manager, this isn't just about somebody who might be in a particular group.
Women don't want to be highlighted as we are special, or we're just another human being trying to do the best we can do in our jobs. We're like everybody else. We just happen to have this thing that our bodies are going to force us to go through. But that doesn't mean that we can't do our jobs anymore. We've suddenly become incapable. We're just going through something, and it's a temporary phase. And understanding that is really important, because what they're feeling like today, they might not be feeling like in 6 months or a year's time.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned there about some things that managers might notice. So some of the symptoms, and if you were to Google this, you'd get pages of this stuff. I mean,
Yeah.
there are many symptoms.
Yeah.
But I'm guessing, thinking about one you mentioned there about maybe being a bit more withdrawn or maybe showing up later for work, again, could be an unrelated reason.
Yeah.
What would be some of the things that you would say are some of the common symptoms that might present themselves at work? Because one of the things that I'm thinking about is if there is a restructuring process and there's some kind of selection criteria, for example, and normally there's a performance sort of basis in that, there could be some underlying issues why a member of the team isn't performing as she used to, which may or may not be connected to menopause,
Yeah.
perimenopause. So what are some of the common symptoms that you might see playing out in the workplace?
Yeah. And I suppose in that context, I think a lot of them will be the psychological symptoms that come with menopause, which most people are just not aware is a thing. We always talk about the hot flushes, don't we? And you hear the same things. But actually, women are really struggling with heightened anxiety, loss of confidence, brain fog. So, if you're suddenly noticing that she was all over something previously, but all of a sudden there's been this dip in her ability to hold the conversation the same way, or she might be forgetting names of people, or she might be arriving to a meeting slightly more disorganized than she normally would. Like I say, it's those subtle changes that she will be working really hard to make sure you don't notice, by the way. So they're not easy to notice in somebody because she inside will be thinking, I can't let anybody know that this is a problem. And if she's aware that there's a restructure happening or redundancies might be on the cards, she'll be working even harder to make sure you don't know that there's a problem because she won't want to be seen as weak or incapable or a risk to the business in any way. So the stress that she is then feeling because she's having to work so much harder to make sure nobody realizes that there is this underlying struggle that she might be having. So yeah, again, I come back to those subtle, just those nuances, just watch what she's doing because the signs will be there if you know her well enough.
So that relationship, as you say.
It's really key. Yeah.
And so we mentioned before about no one's going to want a conversation which is, I've noticed you've been late for work. Are you suffering with perimenopause symptoms? No one's going to want that as a
Yeah.
way in. Have you got any advice on ways in which you can open up the conversation so that you can try and create that space for women to feel that they can talk about these things? And again, it goes back to culture, but I'm thinking about a line manager maybe listening to this or a HR professional who's thinking, I want to encourage more of that, not we're going to be entering into a restructure, but because I want to encourage that anyway. How might you help people to phrase some of those conversations?
Yeah. It is a really difficult one. There is no doubt about it because we're all individuals and we all behave in different ways. And what's acceptable to one is not going to be acceptable to another. Some women are going to be really happy to open up and talk about what's going on for them. And some women are just never going to go there as hard as you try to get them to open up. So I do come back to that relationship is key. And is there someone in the organization that she is more likely to talk to if you're not the right person to be having that conversation? So that self-awareness about, am I the right person to have this conversation or not, is also a really important piece of the puzzle, I think. But coming back to the open questions, you don't seem yourself lately. Is there something I can do? Is there anything you need from me? What can we do as an organization to support you? Keeping it as open as possible, not making it about menopause at all, and asking those same questions of other people in the organization. Ask the men the same questions so that the woman doesn't feel like she's being targeted in some way, but she's still being supported because she's being asked. And if she feels she can, that's her opportunity to open up.
That's really interesting what you said there about it might not be the line manager and that it's not about targeting anybody, because those are questions that everybody would want a line manager to ask them, particularly at a difficult time. And I like what you said there about it's not a failure if someone won't open up to you, because in any situation.
Definitely. Absolutely. Women, we are private about these things. For some women, this is really embarrassing. And especially depending on the symptoms that they're experiencing, some of them can be embarrassing to talk about. And you're never going to want to talk about it to your 30-year-old male manager. So we have to be realistic about what women might be experiencing that they're just not able to tell you openly.
And in terms of things that we talked about earlier about the raising awareness, what things can managers, leaders or organisations do in terms of that support on more of an individual level? So maybe some of those adjustments that somebody might need. As you quite rightly say, this is a phase, this isn't forever. And how long it lasts varies between woman to woman. And some women will sail through it and others will be crippled by it, and you just don't know. What would be your suggestions on some things that women, whether or not they've opened up, but might find useful to have access to in the workplace?
Yeah. So I think there are some really simple basics that every organisation can be doing. So thinking about the ladies' toilets for a starter. Have we got everything we need for women in the toilets? We're not just talking about perimenopausal women here, but just women in general. Have you got a stock of pads and tampons in the toilet at all time? Are your bins regularly emptied? Because one of the main symptoms that women struggle with through their peri years is heavy bleeding, and bleeding that, is not consistent. So you might be bleeding in the middle of the month when you're not expecting to. You get caught short, you don't have what you need. So simple things like that, you might just think, oh, somebody's dealing with that. Actually, go and check. Are the toilets being restocked regularly enough? And are the bins being emptied regularly enough? I heard about this last year, I think, but many organisations are putting a cardigan hanging in the toilets. And it's just a black cardigan, so, nobody knows it's anybody else's. But if women are in the position where they come on unexpectedly and they leak through their clothes, this happens more than we realise. That black cardigan is there to give you some privacy so that you can go change or do whatever you need to do. But it's actually a really special thing to have, knowing that's there in case that happens to you. And so many women would find this so distressing, but I want women to know that it really does happen more often than we realise. It's quite normal. And then you can think about the space in the office, ventilation. Do you have good ventilation in the office? Hot flushes is absolutely a problem for some women. Have fans available. If you have a flexible office space, can you have an area that is kept warmer for the people that need it warmer, and a cooler area? So it depends on your setup, what your office space is like. Are there areas where you can have windows open, or is the whole area air conditioned? Thinking about those types of things, I think, will make a difference. And then not many organisations are doing this, but having one-to-one support, I think, is also really crucial for many women, so that they not only have a safe space to talk, but can talk to somebody that really understands the nuance of their particular symptoms and what's going to help them the most. I think that is a really special piece of help that organisations can offer.
So some practical things there, but also that support. And without generalising, that the HR profession is generally more female dominated not in all organisations, but you are more than likely to find there will be plenty of women in the HR department. And whilst we are always advocating supporting line managers to have those direct relationships, absolutely, as they should, I'm guessing that there will be times when somebody might feel that, as you said earlier, they just want to talk to someone who's not their line manager and maybe who's female for whatever reason, or maybe of a certain age, who knows.
Yeah.
And so how can the HR team create that safe environment, or that, I guess, that psychological safety and that openness where it's okay to come and talk to somebody. Maybe they might not be assigned to be the menopause specialist, but that role of the HR team, I think, could be incredibly important. And how can they go about doing that to make it more of an inclusive space, I guess, for women?
Yeah, I think it's a really important point because I think this is where HR really can make a difference. I think what we really need is for women in HR to set the standard of, okay, let's talk about it. Let's be open. Can the women in HR set the scene and go, I'm okay to talk about it. This is happening to me, assuming you have someone in your HR team that might be going through it. And if they can talk about it, maybe I can talk about it. And if they're talking about it, I can at least go to them to talk about it. And because it's HR, I'm more likely to know that they have my back and that I can trust them and it's going to go no further. It will be confidential. And it again comes back to HR, hopefully building that culture of psychological safety and setting the precedents. Okay, if HR are going to talk about it and if HR are going to actively put things in place, even if it's just free support, maybe the leadership team aren't behind this, but HR are going, I'm going to do this anyway. It only takes one person to make a huge difference. And we saw this in the news recently, actually, with the fire service. And I think it was Nottinghamshire. I don't think I've made that up. But it was one particular lady who just took it upon herself and said, we need this support. And the organisation ended up taking it all on because she was adamant that's what was needed. So it only takes one person.
Yeah, I love that idea, creating that movement yourself almost.
Yeah.
And particularly a difficult time when and the HR team play a huge role in any sort of restructure or any redundancy process, and quite rightly. I'm thinking about if you've created that environment, then it would encourage women maybe to have that offline conversation that says something like, appreciate we're going to be having one-to-one consultations. That office that that you're planning to put them in, I'm just going to get too hot in there, or I'm worried that I'm going to overheat, or maybe I might have a hot flush, or brain fog's an issue for me at the moment. So could I have things written down as well as, or could we record the meeting? I don't know. I'm just free-falling with this. But rather than feeling, as you said earlier, that woman who has to keep trying so hard so that no one will notice, then someone came to me when I worked in HR and said that, I'd be like, absolutely, yeah, we can move the meeting room. We'll get a place with windows. And if you want to take a break halfway through, people are never going to say, no, we can't do that.
Yeah, absolutely. But flexibility in every situation is just going to make the biggest difference. So you just said it all there around flexibility around that redundancy process. Flexibility in terms of the timings of when you're going to have those, but where, like you say, where you're having them and how you're having them, and so that they can come prepared. All of that is really important. Actually, flexibility in day-to-day working environment as well. Being able to start later and not have to do the commute on the tube, for example, if you're coming into London, getting on a cramped tube when you're struggling with night sweats, or you haven't slept all night and you're struggling to get up in the morning. Flexibility is just the game changer.
And this point, obviously, we've said it a few times, haven't we? This is a phase. It's not going to be forever. And it's just to help somebody get through that transition.
Yeah.
So if you could, the HR professionals that are listening, some advice on how they can support their leaders through this redundancy or restructure and making sure they're taking care of the needs of women in particular in peri or post-menopause, what would you say to them as kind of your three kind of top tips as we wrap things up?
Yeah. I think it can be extremely difficult with leaders, and I do hear this pushback all the time from people in HR, is that I can't put this in place because they're just not interested in having the conversation. There is lots you can do that's not going to cost the organisation any money. So go out there and if you're passionate about it and you really think it's needed, which it definitely is just start to do things slowly yourself and get people on board to support you with that. There are lots and lots of free resources out there. There is a website called menopausesupport.co.uk. Go and have a look at it. It is a really valuable website. You can get posters. There's nothing to stop you putting posters up around to raise awareness. There are people out there that will come and do lunch and learns, or even just a webinar, a 30-minute webinar. You can get those things in place very cheaply, or maybe even for free in some cases, that you can just start to bring it in and make it a more natural conversation. And the more people you get on board, the leadership team will have to start listening at some point. And I think one of the other things to be aware of, especially in this, if you're making redundancies and things, is the risk of tribunals coming from women going through their menopause is on the rise. And it has risen by something like 60% in the last 2 years of the number of cases that are being brought. Because if women feel like they're not being treated fairly, they will use sex, age, and discrimination against you if they feel like they are not being treated the same way as everybody else. So it's vitally important now that organisations start listening to what they need. Women are really not asking for the earth. All they want is to be heard and supported. That is it. So that doesn't take a huge amount of effort and money to do that. Whatever size organisation you are, whatever size budget, there is something you can be doing. So I would say just go and utilise what's out there on the internet. If you have a really low budget, there is lots you can do yourself.
Yeah. And I love that notion of taking that on. So if you feel strongly about it, and whatever level you are in the organisation, depending on your influence, you can either go and just get the okay from someone more senior, or if you are that most senior person in the HR team, then you can just go off and do that. And just as you said there, it doesn't need to be something that is hugely costly or time intensive. It's just about taking those small steps so that this is an inclusive environment for all women. And if it does mean that then you're in a situation where you are having to make redundancies, or you are having to restructure the team, you've created that openness, you've created that environment for people.
And that's it. Have it already there, ready and waiting. It's already there to support you when those difficult conversations have to be had at some point. And you've created the culture that will make that so much easier for you and everybody going through it.
I've really enjoyed getting those insights, and I really hope that people that are listening, it's something just to raise awareness and to go away with some practical ideas and some thoughts and suggestions about what they might do in their own organisation. So tell us, where can people find you if they want to connect with you, either for executive coaching or to find out more about menopause? Tell us all the information we need.
Thank you. Yes. So I am always on LinkedIn. It's my place I spend a lot of my time. So yes, just find me Angela Wilkins-Green on LinkedIn. And I also have my website, greenpathcoaching.com, where you can find all about my services and how I might be able to help you.
Oh, wonderful. And we'll put those links in the show notes. So thank you, Angela. I've really enjoyed the conversation today, and I know people are going to get lots of value from it. So yeah, thanks so much for your time.
Lovely. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for listening to the Redundancy Matters podcast. I hope you found today's episode helpful. It would mean a lot to me if you would follow, rate and review this podcast wherever you listen to your podcasts, as this helps it reach more people who are managing redundancies. Let me know what you thought, and if you have ideas for future episodes, I'd love to hear from you. You can find me on LinkedIn, June Hogan, and get in touch via my website, wildwoodcoaching.co.uk, where you'll also find more resources to help you manage redundancies. I hope you'll join me again soon for the next episode of Redundancy Matters.